Well, overseas, the US Secretary of State says America may abandon peace talks between Russia and Ukraine in days. This is if no progress is made. Marco Rubio, speaking after a series of meetings with European politicians in Paris, says President Trump still wants an agreement, but added that the US had other priorities. Let's cross to our US correspondent Simon Marks. Simon, kia ora, good morning. Donald Trump might walk away. Is this brinksmanship?
Well, I think it's very unclear what this is, Susie, coming from the Secretary of State, Marco Rubio. Remember that Donald Trump is the American president who, when he was campaigning for a return to the White House, insisted that he was going to be able to solve the Ukraine crisis on the first day of his presidency. He now concedes that he was being sarcastic when he said that. But there's no question that his Secretary of State today in Paris, after a meeting with European and Ukrainian officials, was expressing tremendous frustration. He spoke to reporters as he was departing from Le Bourget airport and said, if it's not possible to end the war in Ukraine, we need to move on. He said that the Trump administration will decide in a matter of days whether or not this is doable in the next few weeks. Now, there will be those out there who say, how can the Trump administration possibly be surprised by the fact that actually it turns out to be a pretty complicated task to craft peace between Kiev and Moscow? And what is unclear from what Secretary of State Marco Rubio said a few hours ago is whether he's simply talking about the United States walking away temporarily from its current efforts to craft a 30-day across-the-board ceasefire in Ukraine, or whether he is indicating more broadly that President Trump's patience is expiring and that, as he put it, they want to focus on other priorities. We know that they want to disengage from Europe and turn their attention away to attempting to constrain Chinese expansionism in the Indo-Pacific. Is this a broader possible abandonment of the Ukraine project? And then what does that mean for the future of the conflict?
Is it clear how and where this has gone awry?
Well, it's gone awry, mostly, many observers will argue, in Moscow, because President Vladimir Putin has laid down conditions for the 30-day ceasefire that Ukraine finds completely unpalatable, that European leaders find completely unpalatable, but that have been entertained by the Trump administration. And those conditions include an agreement that Ukraine not only won't move troops around the country during any 30-day ceasefire period, but won't even train and exercise them, a termination of all ongoing European and American support for Ukraine, no more weapons shipments during that 30-day ceasefire, none of that stuff. Vladimir Putin wants all that to come to an end. And of course, the Trump administration has already given the Russians President Trump's support for opposition to any membership of NATO for Ukraine. Now, of course, the Ukrainians argue that they are not yet ready to give away all of those concessions to Vladimir Putin, and the Europeans are backing them up. Donald Trump, from day one of his presidency, has been accused of largely tilting the outcome of this process in Russia's favour, and indeed his special envoy Steve Witkoff met with President Putin in the Kremlin last weekend and seemed absolutely beguiled by the Russian leader. However, the Ukrainians, according to the Americans, have been holding things up by refusing to sign that deal that Donald Trump covets so that the Americans can control a sizable percentage of Ukraine's rare earth minerals as repayment for American military assistance since the war began. The last few days have seen Donald Trump expressing fresh frustration with Volodymyr Zelensky, accusing Ukraine entirely falsely once again of starting the war with Russia, and saying of Volodymyr Zelensky that he, Donald Trump, is not a fan of the Ukrainian leader and he could have done a better job of leading his country, which of course also flies in the face of the European argument that Zelensky is the most courageous European leader since Winston Churchill.
A quick word elsewhere with an eye on America. People may have heard in the news there that the head of the Fed, Jerome Powell, his days might be numbered. What's going on there?
Well, they will certainly be numbered if Donald Trump has his way. There's no question that the president wants to fire Jerome Powell, the head of the Fed, because the president argues that the Fed should already have lowered American interest rates, while Jerome Powell and other members of the Federal Reserve Board say that Donald Trump's trade war has put the American economy into such a perilous position that they're not quite sure they're ready to take that step. There is a standoff developing between the president and the Fed chair, with the Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent privately telling Donald Trump that if he gets rid of Jerome Powell, that will represent a crisis for the Trump administration. It will fuel an ongoing lack of confidence on the markets in New York in the Trump administration's handling of the economy, and it will also, of course, raise massive questions about the independence of the Fed. Donald Trump certainly over the last couple of days appears to have been listening to Scott Bessent, but how much longer he does that and whether we do find ourselves in a situation where President Trump fires the starting gun and goes ahead and defenestrates the chair of the Fed, I think is currently an open question. And there's no doubt that were it to happen, it would represent a fresh political crisis back in Washington.
Simon Marks, our US correspondent, thanks very much for your time this morning on RNZ National on Saturday morning. It's 7:20.